Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Wednesday, January 2nd, 2018. Happy New Year to everybody. We are going to go over the bowl games from the last 2 days, college basketball from yesterday, look ahead to today's game, same for the NBA and the NHL, go over a surprising signing by an American League contender, NFL power rankings, and my best bet of the day. All right, let's go to college football. We'll start the New Year's Eve games that were played because we did not do a podcast yesterday. Cincinnati defeats Virginia Tech 35-31 in the Military Bowl. Good win for Cincinnati to close out what was a great year for them. Virginia Tech, disappointing season for them and Justin Fuente. Hyundai Sun Bowl, the Stanford Cardinals defeat the Pittsburgh Panthers 14-13. Stanford, I thought, was a little underwhelming this year, but quietly finishes the season with 9 wins, including the bowl win, and Pitt was what I call a rare successful 7-7, in the sense that they did very well in conference play. They made the conference championship, just lost to a far superior team. I think Pat Narduzzi did a good job this year, and maybe they'll be better next year, but we shall see, because the Coastal Division tends to change year in and year out. A shocking result here from a score standpoint. Oregon defeats Michigan State 7-6 in the Red Box Bowl. Oregon up and down this year, and same for Michigan State. I thought both of these teams were disappointing. And to me, Sparty comes out as the bigger disappointment, not only because they lost this game, because I felt that they were going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Big Ten this year. And the schedule, some of their matchups were in their favor, with them being the home team. And then Oregon, meanwhile, I just don't think Justin Herbert had the year that he thought he was going to have. He's going back to school next year, which is the right decision for him. But I'm not even convinced that he's going to be the best quarterback coming out next year because of Tua Tagovailoa and Jake Fromm. Fromm had a bad game last night, but I'll get to the Sugar Bowl in a few moments, among others. Oklahoma State upsets number 23 Missouri 38-33 in the Liberty Bowl. Great win for Mike Gundy and the Cowboys. They usually thrive when people doubt them, and yet again that's the case here. Oklahoma State, up and down year, has this win. They beat West Virginia. They almost knocked off Oklahoma and cost their chance at a playoff, meaning the Cowboys and maybe Ohio State would have been in instead of them if Oklahoma State would have pulled out the upset in Norman a few months ago. Missouri, I thought, had a good year, but they just fell short in this spot. Drew Lock had a good year. I think he will be a second or third round pick, or maybe a dark horse first round pick if Dwayne Haskins decides to come back to school. Number 23 Northwestern defeats number 17 Utah 31-20 in the Holiday Bowl. Good win for Northwestern. I picked them to win that game because they always thrive as an underdog, and that's what Pat Fitzgerald tends to do. They've had some moments this year, although they got off to a bad start. Utah was off to a good start and faltered at the end. That was mainly due to injury. But Kyle Whittingham, I thought, did a nice job this year as well. Texas A&M defeats North Carolina State 52-13 in the Gator Bowl. Great win to what was a great first year for Jimbo Fisher in College Station. And NC State, disappointing loss to what I thought was quietly a very good year for that school. All right, yesterday's bowl games. Outback Bowl, Iowa defeats number 18 Mississippi State 27-22. Good win for Kirk Ferentz in that program. That was Nick Fitzgerald's final game as a collegiate player. Fiesta Bowl, number 11 LSU defeats number 8 UCF 40-32. As UCF loses a game for the first time since 2016. That's okay. They still had a successful season, and you can't say that they lost to a better team per se, or you can say that, but you can't say that they played poorly in this game. You got to give them credit for showing up, and of course you got to give LSU credit because they are probably the better team here. Although I thought that LSU was sort of fluky this year in the sense that they picked off teams at the right time, and that Alabama game was really what left me sore from them this season. But a good win for Ed Orgeron to finish what I thought was a great year for LSU. And UCF obviously had a great year too. They'll be back next year, probably. Citrus Bowl, number 14, Kentucky defeats number 12, Penn State, 27-24. Trace McSorley got hurt in that game, or else Penn State probably wins. But Mark Stoops, phenomenal season at Kentucky this year. James Franklin, I thought Penn State underwhelmed to some degree. If they had knocked off Ohio State like they should have earlier in the season, maybe things would have broken differently for that team. And speaking of Ohio State, in what was Urban Meyer's final game as head coach of the Buckeyes, they knock off number 9 Washington 28-23 in the Rose Bowl. Dwayne Haskins had a phenomenal game, I thought. 25 of 37, 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the key stat, no turnovers. Jake Browning, wasn't impressed with him, but he put up the numbers because they were trying to come back and make that a game. 35 of 54 and 313 yards. I wonder if this is Haskins' final game at Ohio State as well. It remains to be seen. Number 15, Texas upsets number 5, Georgia, 28-21, the Sugar Bowl. That score does not reflect how dominant Texas was in this game. Biggest win for the Longhorns in years. Tom Herman as an underdog is just sensational. A ton of outright upset wins. And a monster against the spread as well. And Texas, in year 2 of Tom Herman, smashing success after what I thought was a disappointing first year for that program. So, yeah, they may have had 4 losses, but getting your last win in a game like this has to mean something for that program. It's a New Year's Six Bowl, and there's some momentum as they head in to next season. Meanwhile, Georgia, very disappointing loss. Fromm was not good whatsoever. 21 of 35, 224 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Sam Ehlinger was okay, 19 of 27, 169 yards. The running back Trey Watson for Texas was good, 81 carries, 91 yards. DeAndre Swift fumbled a couple times for Georgia, and the turnovers ultimately came back to haunt the Bulldogs, or else this would have been a much more interesting game. We'll preview the national championship game throughout the week, and I'll make my pick on next Monday's podcast. Should be a good one. Alabama is currently a 6-point favorite. The line keeps moving. 2 14-0s. This is probably the best rivalry in the sport as of today, because Ohio State has dominated Michigan, and Alabama has dominated LSU over the last 2 seasons as well. And Clemson, Florida State was supposed to be something. That hasn't been something in a couple of years. So why not Clemson, Alabama? These 2 teams, this is their 4th straight year these 2 teams are meeting. Last year, these 2 teams met in the first round of the playoff as Alabama was the 4th seed, knocking off what was the 1 seed in Clemson. Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Kelly Bryant, and I think that quarterback move changed the outlook of this team. And I think that they can beat Alabama. I don't know if they will, but they certainly will give them a game. And Tua Tagovailoa looks as healthy as he could be. He looked much better in the semifinal than he did against Georgia in the SEC title game. So there's a lot of intrigue for this game, and obviously this Dexter Lawrence return for Clemson, that is obviously the other big key thing here. And the other thing which makes this a rivalry, Alabama hasn't dominated Clemson with the exception of last year's game. But the key thing is here, those 2 games, those 2 national title games before last year's semifinal game between these 2 teams, both of them were competitive, highly competitive. Deshaun Watson was the best player in both of those games, even though Clemson lost the first time around. And the second time around, Jalen Hurts actually played really well for Alabama. And then Watson led that incredible drive for Clemson to win that game. So it should be very interesting next Monday night. And I'm very looking forward to it. Let's go to college basketball. Oh, one quick note in college football. It looks like Dana Holgorsen is heading to Houston from West Virginia. To me, that's a big surprise. Dana Holgorsen loved being at West Virginia. I think he did a good job there. He's gotten some of those teams to overachieve. But this year is promising for them. And then they lost their last 2 games. And they were both close games. And if they pulled both of those games out, they're in the playoff instead of Oklahoma because they probably knock off Texas in the Big 12 championship game. But if they say they knock off Texas they're in the playoff, they're your 4th seed. They would have been playing against Alabama, but then they probably would have lost to Alabama. Although a Will Grier versus Tua Tagovailoa game would have been fun, and maybe Will Grier wins the Heisman instead of Kyler Murray. That's like the what-if of the season in terms of the Big 12 for sure, if West Virginia had pulled off those last 2 games. But yeah, Holgorsen heads to Houston. I think that's going to be a great hire for the Cougars. The AAC West Division, to me, and even that conference is wide open, although UCF's very good. Charlie Strong's a solid head coach. That team just happened to fall apart badly at the end of the season. And then you have Temple, who is usually good, but a little bit of turmoil going on right now with Manny Diaz going to Miami after originally accepting the Temple job, or I should say going back to Miami. And then you also have, in that conference, Cincinnati, who had a very good year. Navy had a very bad season. I expect them to at least turn it around a little bit. Mike Norvell's a great coach at Memphis. So Holgorsen would have some competition in Houston within that conference. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. And in terms of replacements for Holgorsen, we'll get into that more, let's say, on tomorrow's podcast, because I got to get going with college hoops. I'm just going to go over last night's games. In yesterday's. Not many, actually. Number 10, Virginia Tech knocked off Notre Dame 81-66 as ACC play began. Virginia Tech 12-1, now 1-0 in ACC play. Notre Dame 10-4, 0-1 in ACC play. Number 9, Florida State defeats Winthrop 87-76. Florida State improves to 12-1. Winthrop drops to 8-5. San Diego State defeats Cal State Northwood 65-60. San Diego State 8-5. Cal State Northwood 6-9. Radford defeats Mars Hill 81-51 as Radford goes to 8-6. And it was 80-51, by the way, not 81-51. A big win for St. John's, 89-69 over number 16 Marquette. St. John's 13-1, 1-1 in Big East. Marquette drops to 11-3 as this is not an upset. St. John's was a 2-point favorite. Washington defeats Cal State Fullerton 84-76. Washington goes to 9-4, and Fullerton drops to 4-10. Bigger slate tonight. Some conference plays, or conference play is underway in a lot of these big conferences. Big 10, Big East, Big 12, now AAC. I'm just going to go through the list. 4 o'clock, Husk Hill Prairie View. 6 o'clock, Presbyterian South Carolina State. 6:30, number 24, Nebraska at Maryland on the Big Ten Network. And now I'm going to be making picks for a lot of these games because it's conference play now. I'm going to take the Terrapins. They need the win more. They're a 1.5-point favorite, and I think they win a close one over Nebraska, who's currently ranked and I think poised to break through and make the tournament this year. Seton Hall and Xavier. Seton Hall got lucky with that win against St. John's. I think they drop here the Xavier. That game's on Fox Sports 1. CBS Sports Network at 6:30 have Tulane and Cincinnati. Cincinnati's going to whoop them. 7 o'clock ACC Network, Cornell and Wake Forest. ESPN 2, Harvard at number 15, North Carolina. Georgetown, Butler. Give me Butler there at home. I think they'll roll Georgetown. I just don't think Georgetown's very good. My most intriguing game is number 11, Texas Tech at West Virginia. 7 o'clock ESPN U. Texas Tech only has one loss on the year. West Virginia was underachieved in non-conference play, already has 4 losses. This is a big spot for the Mountaineers. They need a couple big wins in the in conference play to ensure themselves as an at-large, because I don't think, if the season ended today, I don't think this is a tournament team for sure. I would have to do a mock bracket. Maybe I'll do that on tomorrow or Friday's podcast. And we'll see if West Virginia ends up making it or not. If they win this game, then I'll probably put them on there. If not, then I won't put them on there. But I'm certainly going to take the 4.5 for them to cover at home against a ranked opponent. And I wouldn't rule out an outright upset, but I'm just going to take the points, but pick Texas Tech to win on the court. But I think the Mountaineers will cover the point spread. Temple and UCF at 7 o'clock on the ESPN News. I think both of these teams are going to make the tournament. And I like Temple to pull off the road upset. I just have a good feeling about that team right now. You have Columbia and Binghamton, Maine and Brown, Florida National and North Florida, Dartmouth, Vermont, Boston University American, Bucknell Army, Allen and Campbell, Washington College High Point, Kennesaw Yale, Lafayette Lehigh, Drake Evansville, 7:30 ACC Network, South Carolina Upstate and Georgia Tech, Southeast Louisiana and Stephen F. Austin, Nichols and Northwestern State, 8 o'clock ESPN 3, Tulsa at number 19, Houston. I think Houston remains unbeaten. East Carolina SMU, I think SMU takes that one and wins big. North Dakota State and Omaha, Central Arkansas and Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Northern Iowa and Bradley, Missouri State and Southern Illinois, Illinois State and Valparaiso, New Orleans and Abilene Christian, McNeese and Incarnate Word, Lamar Houston Baptist. 8:30 Big Ten Network, Northwestern at number 8 Michigan State. I think that Sparty wins, but Northwestern covers. DePaul Villanova, 8:30 Fox Sports 1. DePaul's improved, but they won't win at Villanova. UConn, South Florida, 8:30 CBS Sports Network. This is a big game. South Florida overachieving in non-conference play. They're 10-2. If they're able to pick off UConn at home here, then we have to have a conversation about South Florida being for real. I think UConn gets the win. I trust Dan Hurley more than Brian Gregory. So I think UConn, led by Jalen Adams, gets the win on the road and covers the 2.5. I don't want to say easily, because I can easily see this being like a 6-point game or so. 9 o'clock ESPN News, Iowa State and Oklahoma State. Trap game possibly for the Cyclones, who are 10-2 off to a fine start this year. Oklahoma State's probably the worst team in the conference. I think the Cyclones get the win and they cover the 4. Texas against Kansas State on ESPNU. I think that the Wildcats get this win at home. They need it in the worst way. A very interesting game on ESPN2. Number 23 Oklahoma at number 5 Kansas. I think that the Jayhawks get the win at home, but I think the Sooners hang around in this game and easily cover the 8.5. I think this could be a 4-point game. And I really think that Lon Kruger's team is for real. Maybe there's a little bit of, I don't want to even call it Ewing theory anymore, because the Knicks did not win the championship without Patrick Ewing. To me, it should be the Wentz theory, because the Eagles won the championship without Carson Wentz. But if the Eagles win again with Nick Foles, then you have to change it to Wentz theory. And obviously Ewing theory is what Bill Simmons came up with. Bill Simmons, obviously, of The Ringer. But yeah, maybe there's a little bit of Ewing theory with Trae Young in Oklahoma this year, but I think they cover, but Kansas gets the win. South Dakota and Denver, Indiana State, Loyola Chicago, New Mexico and Air Force, Boise State and Wyoming, Bethesda, and UC Santa Barbara at 10 o'clock, as well as Fresno State, San Jose State. Is that a trap game for Fresno State? Maybe. But I think they get the win. Colorado State and UNLV at 10:30, two underwhelming Mountain West teams. And 11 o'clock on ESPNU, Utah State and number 6 Nevada. Utah State only has 3 losses on the year, so they did a nice job out of the non-conference slate. And I do think Nevada remains undefeated and gets the win here at home over a pretty decent Aggies team, per se. I'm going to call them pretty decent right now. We'll see what they turn out to be. I'm going to work on the resumes after the podcast and really get things oriented with college basketball now that college football is nearly over after Monday. NBA, only 5 games on the slate last night. The Raptors defeat the Jazz 122-116. Toronto goes to 28-11. Utah drops to 18-20. Kawhi Leonard, a career-high 45 points on 16 of 22 shooting. He also had 6 boards. Pascal Siakam had 28 and 10 3-pointers. Norman Powell off the bench had 14. Jay Crowder led the Jazz in scoring off the bench. He had 30 with 6 boards. And then the rest of the bench didn't do much. Out of the starters, Derek Favors had 21. Rudy Gobert had 16 and 9. Ricky Rubio had 14 with 8 assists. And Donovan Mitchell had 19. The Bucks defeat the Pistons 121-98. Good win for Milwaukee. They have the best record, I believe, in the NBA right now, if I'm not mistaken. They are 26-10. Yes, they do. So good for the Bucks as they improved to what I just mentioned, 26-10. Detroit drops to 16-19. Brook Lopez actually led the Bucks in scoring in this game. He had 25 points. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 15 points, 8 boards, 7 assists. Chris Middleton at 22. Eric Bledsoe at 18. Malcolm Brogdon at 13. Bench didn't do much. The Bucks really need to upgrade that if they are to make a run in the Eastern Conference. Blake Griffin had 29 points and 9 boards. Andre Drummond had 15 points and 7 boards. Reggie Jackson had 19. Off the bench with 13 points. Kyrie Thomas, the rookie. The Nuggets defeat the Knicks 115-108. The Nuggets are 24-11. The Knicks are 9-29. Malik Beasley led the Nuggets in scoring off the bench. He had 23 with 5 3-pointers. Paul Millsap came off the bench, 16 points, 9 boards. Torrey Craig had 13. Nikola Jokic had a triple-double, 19, 14, and 15. The Trailblazers defeat the Kings 113-108 in overtime. Good win for Portland against an overachieving Sacramento team. Portland 22-16, Sacramento 19-18. Damian Lillard had 25 with 6 boards and 6 assists. Jusuf Nurkic, look at this line, folks. 24 points, 23 rebounds, and 7 assists. Al-Farouq Aminu had 13. Mo Harkless had 11. CJ McCollum had 16. Off the bench, Steph Curry had 18. Buddy Hield had 27. De'Aaron Fox had 13. Nemanja Bjelica had 14. And Bogdan Bogdanovic had 19 off the bench. The 76ers defeat the Clippers 119-113. Good win for Philly. They go to 24-14. Clippers drop to 21-16. Joel Embiid, 28 points and 19 boards. Ben Simmons had 14, 9 boards, 8 assists. J.J. Redick in his Clippers return, I should say his second Clippers return, had 18. Jimmy Butler had 16. Off the bench, Mike Muscala had 10. TJ McConnell had 11. So 76ers bench is heading in the right direction. But I still think they need to make a move there to really put themselves in a good position in the East. Daniel Gallinari and Tobias Harris each had 21. Lou Williams had 22 off the bench, and Montrezl Harrell had 20 off the bench. Tonight's slate is bigger. 7 o'clock, Mavericks Hornets. Heat Cavaliers. Hawks Wizards. 7:30, Pelicans Nets. 8 o'clock, Timberwolves Celtics. On ESPN, no Kyrie Irving tonight. Hey, guess what? I'm going to take the Minnesota Timberwolves to pull out the outright upset on the road. I don't feel good about this at all. But the Celtics have been losing weird games this year. They lost at home to the Knicks. They lost at home to the Suns. Those are the two of the worst teams in the league. They lost at home to the Magic. They lost at home to Giannis and the Bucks, but I can't fault them for that one. They've had some weird results this year, but I think this is another weird one. So give me the Timberwolves in a close one, led by Karl Anthony Towns to get the win. And I think those two pieces they got in the Butler trade have been good contributors for the Timberwolves so far this season. The Magic at the Bulls, the Pistons at the Grizzlies. 9 o'clock, the 76ers at the Suns. Trap game for the Sixers possibly there. 10:30 ESPN, Thunder, Lakers. No LeBron James. If LeBron's back, Lakers are winning, no doubt about it. But LeBron's not back, so give me Oklahoma City on the road led by Russell Westbrook and Paul George to get the win. NHL. Only 3 games last night and yesterday. The Bruins defeated the Blackhawks 4-2 in the Winter Classic as the Bruins go to 22-14-4 on the year. Chicago drops to 15-21-6. Boston, number 1 star of the game with a goal and assist, David Pastrnak. Number 2 star of the game with 32 saves on 34 shots, Cam Ward. Number 3 star of the game, 32 saves on 36 shots. And the number 3 star, a goal and assist, Patrice Bergeron. So 2013 Stanley Cup rematch. Couple familiar faces from that finals. Obviously all the stars on both sides. Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Corey Crawford, Tuukka Rask, and Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand. So a little bit of history between those two teams, and obviously the original Six Factor as well. The Predators defeat the Flyers 4-0. Predators improved to 24-15-2. Philadelphia 15-19-5. Number 1 star of the game, the backup goaltender with 32 saves on 32 shots, Juuso Saros. Number 2 star of the game with 2 goals, Victor Vritzen. And number 3 star of the game with the goal, Craig Smith. The Golden Knights defeat the Kings 2-0. Golden Knights with a 24-15-4 record now. They've rid the ship a lot. And the Kings dropped to 16-22-3. Number 1 star of the game with a goal and assist, Brandon Peary. Number 2 star of the game with an assist, Nate Schmidt. Number 3 star of the game with 17 saves on 17 shots, Marc-Andre Fleury. Today's slate's a little bigger. At 7 o'clock on NBCSN, you have the Penguins at the Rangers. I would assume on the call, I'm going to say it's going to be Kenny Albert and either Brian Boucher or Pierre Maguire. Because I don't think Doc Emmerich is doing a back-to-back. Wouldn't rule out Eddie Olczyk on this game either. So I'm going to say it's probably Kenny Albert, Eddie Olczyk, and Brian Boucher calling this game. No Blackhawks game tonight, so I'm sure Edzo will be doing this game. I'm going to say Kenny Albert and Brian Boucher. I'm going to say that the Penguins get the win, but in either overtime or a shootout, because the Rangers have been competitive. Henrik Lundqvist is in net tonight, and I think they want to prove that they're not one of the worst teams in the NHL on a national stage. So give me Penguins 4-3 in overtime here. Canucks, Senators, Flames, Red Wings, 8:30 Devils, Stars, 9:30 NBCSN, Sharks, Avalanche. This game, I'm going to say this is Gordon Miller and Pierre Maguire. Pierre Maguire, the reason why I think he's going to be doing this game is because he's been doing a lot of West Coast games this year, especially in Colorado. And I have a feeling that Gordon Miller is going to be the announcer with him on this game. Wouldn't rule out John Forslund. Wouldn't rule out John Forslund on Penguins Rangers either if Kenny Albert does Rangers radio. But the Knicks aren't playing tonight. So that crosses off any conflicts with Mike Breen in the ESPN schedule. I'm sure Mike Breen is doing one of the 2 games tonight. Maybe the Laker game because he's out in the West Coast anyway with the Knicks. So I'm sure he's doing the Laker game tonight. Or I would definitely bet on it. So, no Knicks game to interfere with. You would have Don LaGreca do the Ranger radio and put Albert on TV and give Emmerich the night off. So, wouldn't rule out John Forslund on either of these 2 games. It's probably going to be Kenny Albert on the Ranger game and Gord Miller on the Sharks Avalanche game with Pierre Maguire. And for a pick, let's go with the Avalanche at home. I like how they've been playing lately. Although San Jose, to me, has been a little up and down. That was my preseason cup pick with their addition of Erik Karlsson before the year. But I really like what I've seen out of the Avalanche this year. But the one thing for me, long-term, I'm not sold on their goaltending, but I think the outstanding trio of Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen and Gabriel Landeskog outweighs that. And mediocre goaltenders have been winning cups a lot throughout the last couple years. And not even mediocre, I would say about better than mediocre. Mediocre is a bit of a strong word, but I really like this Avs team a lot, so give me them to win on home ice in that game. And the Oilers and the Coyotes is also at 9:30 tonight as well. And now that I did the guest the announcer game for the NHL games, so I'm going to do it for the 2 NBA games. The Boston game against the Timberwolves, I'm going to say that is Ryan Ruocco and Hubie Brown. The reason why I'm going to say Ruocco is because I'm sure Ian Eagle will be doing the Nets game tonight, and there's no conflict for Ian Eagle. So that's just easy there. And then the Laker game, I think, is going to be Mike Breen and Mark Jackson. And I think for reporters, J.A. Adonde with the Laker game and Doris Burke in Boston. This is my guess. The New York Yankees made a surprising move late last night by signing Troy Tulowitzki on a league minimum deal. This could mean a lot of things. This could mean that they know they're not landing Manny Machado, or this could mean a stopgap for Didi Gregorius before Gregorius returns. Jeff Passan, now of ESPN, reported that this does not rule them out for Manny Machado, which is good news for the Yankees. So I guess I'll just have to listen to what Jeff Passan says because I trust him and he's a good reporter. And ESPN got themselves a good pickup in terms of reporting there. But maybe they'll use Tulo as their Neil Walker type of player. And Neil Walker was pretty good for them last year, played a bunch of different positions. Maybe they'll do that with Tulowitzki. Maybe they'll try him out at first base. If Luke Voigt, Greg Bird combo doesn't pan out. And there's a lot of ways this can go. I'm very, very, very intrigued. And obviously the 3 finalists for Manny Machado are the Yankees, the Phillies, and the White Sox. I do think he'll end up in the Bronx, but I don't think it's as big of a lock as people in the media like Dan Clark are saying or anything like that. But with that Tulowitzki signing, I think that the odds went from 90-10 to, let's say, 60-40 that he indeed goes to the Bronx, meaning Machado, as in he. NFL Power Rankings. I'm going to do this pretty quick. Go from 3, 2, to 1. This is the last one of the regular season. And after the first round of the playoffs, I'm just going to power rank the teams left in the playoffs. Spoiler alert, the top 12 teams on the power rankings are the 12 playoff teams. So teams from 32 to 13 are the teams sitting out of this year's playoffs. 32 is the Arizona Cardinals. What else can I say? They're the worst team in the league this year by a mile. Steve Wilkes is out of a job. They're interviewing some big names for their jobs. Cliff Kingsbury, Mike McCarthy. I'm interested to see who they hire. If they hire a big name, then I wouldn't rule them out as a surprise team next year. 31 is the Oakland Raiders. They hired Mike Maycock as their new GM, replacing the fired Reggie McKenzie. I'm interested to see what Maycock and John Gruden do together. Number 30 is the New York Jets. A disastrous finish to what was a disaster of a season for them in some cases. Disaster might be a strong word to describe a team that's rebuilding, but it just felt like a mess with a lot of blowout results and Todd Bowles. And they finally fired him after what he should have been let go last year or even the year before. But Bowles is finally gone. I think the pressure's on the Jets to hire a big-name coach or else that fan base won't be happy. Number 29 is the Buffalo Bills, a team that a lot of people thought was going to be the worst team in the league. They weren't even the worst team in their own division. Josh Allen showed a lot of promise this year. he was, I'd say, the fourth best rookie quarterback. And he's had some moments better than Sam Darnold this year, but Sam Darnold did a lot with less, and so did Josh Allen, for that matter. So the 3-4's up for the debate, and obviously the best two rookie quarterbacks this year, Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson. You got to include Jackson in there because he really helped turn the Ravens season around, although I'm not a huge fan of Jackson. I just have to give him credit for the Ravens turnaround. And I'll get to the Ravens in a little bit. Number 28 is the San Francisco 49ers. Disappointing season for them, obviously with so many injuries. I think that could be a surprise team next year if Garoppolo stays healthy. And Nick Mullins was actually a good rookie quarterback too. Can't discount him. You could argue he was probably the fifth best rookie quarterback, maybe even 4 or 3. He's had some moments better than Allen and Darnold. If I had to put him in tiers, I'd say Mayfield, then Jackson, and then Darnold, Mullins, Allen, in no order in particular with those 3, and then Josh Rosen, who I thought was awful this year. And like I said, a new coach would help maybe motivate and rejuvenate him a little bit. Who's obviously the biggest disappointing rookie, in my opinion. I mean, Josh Rosen. Number 27 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Adam Schefter of ESPN reported that they are in all likelihood sticking with Jameis Winston. Winston finished the season strong, but I have questions about him and his leadership off the field. I'm interested to see who they hire as their new coach. Number 26, the New York Giants. Probably the most disappointing team in the league by some accounts. Although you could argue that 5 teams were more disappointing than the Giants, maybe even 6. But they're certainly on the list of most disappointing teams this year. Eli Manning could it be it for him? Dave Gettleman said that they're evaluating him. So he basically didn't rule out the opportunity of him not being a Giant next year. So that's very interesting. And he made a lot of interesting comments. He raved about Saquon Barkley. He pretty much admitted that Odell Beckham's here to stay. I think that's a good thing for the Giants because Odell Beckham's their best wide receiver, even though he's drama off the field. So, to me, the Giants are by far the most intriguing team in the offseason because of Eli Manning's future, obviously, and they need to improve that defense too. They could be a couple interesting moves away from being a contender, or it could go the other way and they trade away Odell, and as people are speculating, and rebuild. So they're a team that's unfortunately stuck in the middle, as well as number 25, also from the NFC East, another disappointing team this year, the Washington Redskins. They're a disappointment because of injuries more than anything, though. And Alex Smith, to me, did not have a good year even when he was healthy. I just was not impressed with him. I think they can use an upgrade at that position, and the ceiling of that team would be higher, kind of like maybe the Chiefs from last year. But I'm not saying that they can be next year's Chiefs per se, but I'm saying that maybe an upgrade at that position would change the outlook of that team as well as the Giants. Number 24 is the Detroit Lions. They had a disappointing season in year 1 under Matt Patricia. They've had some fine moments like upsetting the Patriots and shutting out the Packers, but other than that, they were a disaster. Number 23, the Atlanta Falcons, another disaster of a team this year that had high expectations. This was arguably the most disappointing team in the league, but my case against it being them was that they had a lot of injuries, and the case against it being the Giants was that they were 3-13 last year, and people thought that they were closer to the team that went 11-5 rather than the team that went 3-13. Indeed, they were closer to the team that went 3-13 because they went 5-11. So I wouldn't consider the Giants the most disappointing team, but they certainly have an argument, as well as Atlanta, as well as the next team on this list, number 22, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They certainly were the AFC's biggest disappointment by a lot of people, but I'm going to say they were the second biggest disappointment in the AFC, as I didn't think this was a playoff team before the year because I wasn't sold on Blake Bortles, and my theory of that turned out to be true, as Blake Bortles reverted to the Blake Bortles that I thought he was, and now the Jaguars are probably going to be looking for a new quarterback, and obviously an upgrade there changed their ceiling as well. Number 21, the Miami Dolphins. Disappointing finish to their season. They were in the race until the very end, and they finished the year 7-9. Adam Gase is out of a job, and Gase obviously will be hired somewhere else, because I think Gase is a good coach, but the Dolphins are just a dysfunctional organization. So I do think Gase will get another chance because he deserves one. He's one of those guys that deserves a second chance. He took the Dolphins to the playoffs in year one. He wasn't a bad coach. I just think that the Dolphins are a bad organization and did him wrong. But that's another team to look out for in terms of quarterback change. Tannehill, can't say he was a bust per se, but he certainly didn't turn out to what the Dolphins had hoped. Number 20 is the Green Bay Packers. This was probably the most disappointing team in the league this year because a lot of people thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the best player in football, but he was far from it. Mike McCarthy got fired. Rodgers had some injury issues throughout the year. And now the Packers are looking for a new head coach. And they have to hire the right coach, or else that franchise is in trouble. Number 19 is the Denver Broncos. Disappointing finish to their season after some people thought that they were a team that was going to end up as a wild card. And Vance Joseph's out of a job. He should have been out of a job last year. He was a disaster. And now they're looking for a new coach as well. Number 18 is the Cincinnati Bengals. They just had too many injuries, so I can't really consider them as a big-time disappointment. But they are a disappointment, but they had too many injuries, kind of like Atlanta. But we'll see with them next year. They rightfully got rid of Marvin Lewis. Time had run its course with him there. Number 17, the Carolina Panthers. They brought back Ron Rivera after that team faltered to the finish line. I'm interested to see what happens with this team. This team kind of reminded me of the Giants from 2012, a team that started off pretty well and then faltered late. But is this a Giants situation from a fact that will this team end up being a bad team over the next 5 years like the Giants turned into after their 2012 season, after they faltered in the second half of that season and turned into what they are right now, which is a dumpster fire? Or will the Panthers ride the ship and bounce back and make the postseason? Time will tell. 16, the Tennessee Titans. I think Mike Vrabel, their new coach, excellent job in year one. He got a lot out of this team that really wasn't any good. I think that this team could be better next year with the right free agent signings and right moves. But the key to this team, why they didn't make the playoffs, was injuries. And I think that they'll be a force to be reckoned with next year in what should be a much better AFC South. You already have two contenders in the Texans and the Colts. Jaguars could be a bounce-back team, and then the Titans, with the right moves, can be right there. That could be the best division in football next year. Number 15 is the Cleveland Browns. Yes, I did just say the Cleveland Browns are number 15 on this list. They, I think, had the best season in terms of a team with a losing record. I can't say their season was a failure because of the success of all their rookies. And obviously Baker Mayfield turning into a big hit. He should be the front runner for the Rookie of the Year award for turning a 0-win team into a 7-win team and nearly an 8-win team if there weren't a couple dumb mistakes. The Browns need to get a new coach. Greg Williams is not the answer. If they bring back Greg Williams, then it's same old Browns. If they bring in a big name like Mike McCarthy, then they're going to be a contender next year. Number 14 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is my pick for the most disappointing team in the league. They really underachieved by all accounts. Mike Tomlin probably should be let go, but he won't be because the Steeler franchise is enamored with him. But the big change they might make is a possible trading of Antonio Brown. He's not happy there. He asks for a trade. We'll see if he gets it. The Jets would be a nice, logical landing spot for him. That would give Sam Darnold a weapon that he absolutely could use. Would be interesting if they traded for Antonio Brown and signed Le'Veon Bell. They immediately become the second best team in the AFC East with those two moves. Because I think the Jets need to fix their offensive line, give Darnold some weapons, and their defense to me is a little overrated. So they're not close, but if they get two generational talents, that doesn't make them a contender. That just makes them the second best team in a bad AFC East. But the Steelers, very disappointing season. They were 6-2-1 or 7-2-1 at one point, and they faltered. They barely beat the Patriots. Tom Brady was just awful in that game and handed that game to them. And then, let's face it, the refs were overshadowed by Mike Tomlin in that Saints game. Tomlin made some mistakes by the fake punt. And then they barely beat the Bengals in Week 17 and then banked on Baker Mayfield leading a Browns comeback against the Ravens, which nearly happened. So the Steelers nearly got lucky for the second time in a short amount of time. I remember the Steelers got lucky a few years ago when the Jets faltered in Buffalo predictably. And the Steelers beat whoever they had to beat at home, and then they ended up making the playoffs over the Jets and ended up making the second round. I think that was the year that the Broncos won the Super Bowl and Peyton Manning's last year. Back to the power rankings. Number 13 is the Minnesota Vikings. Probably the NFC's biggest disappointment this year. Although you can make the case for Green Bay, but the case for Minnesota is that they were favored to win the division before the year. People thought that Kirk Cousins was an upgraded quarterback over Case Keenum, including myself, and I still feel that way. But I'm just not a Case Keenum fan. To me, that Vikings year last year was a career year for him. What faltered the Vikings is that Kirk Cousins didn't perform in big games, and that was his knock at Washington. Now is the knock here in year one with the Vikings, and these Vikings teams are better than those Redskins teams that Cousins played on, and it's such a big disappointment. They obviously were dealing with the Everson Griffin situation. That was some turmoil that didn't get enough attention. Their secondary wasn't great this year. I would pick them as a logical bounce-back team for next year if I had to pick one. It's either them or if I had to pick one from the AFC if they make the right moves, especially at quarterback Jacksonville. And number 12, let's start with the playoff power rankings. The Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Foles isn't 100%, but it looks like he's good to go for their big game against the Bears. Very interested to see how that plays out. That's going to be the Sunday afternoon game, surprisingly on NBC. Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, and Michelle Tafoya on the call that one. I thought that would be Saturday night on NBC, and then the Cowboy game would be on Fox in the 4:40 window. But no, NBC gets the Sunday 4:40 window featuring the Eagles and the Bears. And I'm interested to see how Foles performs in this game, especially against the Bears defense, which is sensational. Number 11 is the Baltimore Ravens. Big time props to John Harbaugh getting them there. Making the quarterback change certainly helped this team. And Lamar Jackson, I think, was the second best rookie quarterback this year. And he's very much exceeded my expectations. Number 10 is the Dallas Cowboys. I think this is a team that could be vulnerable in round one because they have a disadvantage at coach and quarterback. They probably have an advantage on defense and probably have an advantage at skill position offensive players with Elliott and Cooper over Lockett and Baldwin and Carson. So that's that, and I think that is the most interesting playoff game of the weekend. Number 9 is the Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien, good turnaround. They were 0-3, and they won the division. Their record could have been better if they didn't lose a lot of close games. And the same could be said for Dallas. Don't forget, Houston beat Dallas on Sunday Night Football earlier in the year. That was a swing game for both of those teams, although both of those teams won their respective divisions. So a good football year in the state of Texas. Number 8, the Seattle Seahawks. They've had a phenomenal season, a season in which a lot of people thought that they were going to be under 500 and that Pete Carroll would be on the hot seat. Nope. Pete Carroll earned himself a contract extension. Russell Wilson should be an MVP candidate. And here they are as a wild card team with a pretty good chance to advance. And number 7, the Indianapolis Colts, a team that I thought had a less than 10% chance to make the postseason, because I really thought that Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Houston were all better teams this year, but I've proven to be wrong. Andrew Luck is back as an elite quarterback. He has an offensive line. T.Y. Hilton's had a good year. The defense has exceeded expectations this year, and their coach has been sensational. But Frank Reich is not my coach of the year because I think Matt Nagy deserves it over him, which leads to my number 6, the Chicago Bears. 12-4 is better than 10-6. But the Bears are better than the Colts, so that's what makes Reich's case interesting. But Matt Nagy, I think, deserves it for turning around a big market team in the Bears in year 1 of his coaching job, getting a lot out of Mitchell Trubisky, who isn't even one of the best 2 quarterbacks from his draft class. And here they are in the playoffs, and that defense is just sensational. Khalil Mack obviously single-handedly changed the ceiling of this team, or I should say the addition of Khalil Mack. So that's what hurts Matt Nagy's case. But I do think the Bears are a dark horse in the postseason, mainly because of their defense. Number 5 is the New England Patriots. This is just out of respect. They're 11-5. They played really well against the Jets and really somewhat okay against the Bills. I just was impressed with them in that Jets game. I thought they were going to not try in the Jets game, but they did. I have to give them credit for that. Or maybe that was part of the Jets laying down. But, hey, here are the Patriots again as the number 2 seed in the AFC and have a real chance to make the Super Bowl. Number 4 is the Los Angeles Chargers. They've had a really good year this year, good bounce-back year. They're in the playoffs, and I think they are a force to be reckoned with in the AFC. Number 3, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're your AFC West champions. Patrick Mahomes should be the favorite for MVP. Number 2, the Los Angeles Rams. A couple get-right wins in a row against bad division opponents in the Niners and the Cardinals. Todd Gurley gets his much-needed rest. C.J. Anderson did a nice job filling in for him. He's an overqualified backup. And Jared Goff seems to have gotten right over these last 2 weeks. After playing horribly in back-to-back weeks on Sunday Night Football against the Bears and the Eagles, respectively. And number 1, the New Orleans Saints. I think they're the favorites right now to win the Super Bowl. Ignore Week 17. They sat all their starters. Although, I wasn't impressed with Teddy Bridgewater, though. He needed to have a good game to have quarterback-needy teams like the Giants talk themselves into a contract for him, but he did not play well. But anyway, the Saints are poised to go on another run. Drew Brees has to be in the conversation for MVP. I don't think he'll win. because he sat week 17 and he wasn't good in some nationally televised games, which hurt his case and which helps Mahomes' case because Mahomes is brilliant. And every time he's been on national TV, obviously the Chargers game, even though they lost, that comeback in Denver, that Rams game, even though they lost, and back to the Saints for a minute. They upgraded their secondary, trading for Eli Apple, formerly of the Giants. He's had a good impact on their secondary. Marshawn Lattimore is a good defensive back. The rookie Marcus Davenport, who I criticized them trading up for, has been solid. So they have a lot going right for them, and I can't wait to see them perform in the playoffs. And I would love to see Drew Brees get another crack at a championship because he deserves it. And last but not least, my best bet of the day, brought to you by DraftKings. 12-team moneyline parlay, plus 447 to win, $5.69. Wizards, Thunder, and I have the Thunder on there because I don't think LeBron's playing. Vermont, Butler, North Carolina, Yale, Lehigh, Brown, Stephen F. Austin, SMU, Abilene Christian, and Houston. And that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping everything from college basketball, the NBA, the NHL. I'm going to do my college basketball resume game with all the major teams. And also have my best bet for tomorrow as well. I hope you guys have a great day.